My phone rang at 6:30 that evening, just as I finished applying my lipstick for dinner. It was Jake, my son, and his voice carried that apologetic tone that immediately made my stomach drop. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but Marcello's restaurant called and said they made a mistake with our reservation tonight. They double-booked the table, and there's nothing available. The birthday dinner for Dad's memorial is canceled." My heart shattered. This dinner meant everything to me. Instead, I decided to visit Robert's grave and tell him about our day. But I forgot my purse at home. Driving back toward my house to retrieve my purse, I took the familiar route down Maple Street that passes directly in front of Marcello's restaurant. The golden glow from the large windows caught my attention first, but it was Jake's distinctive red pickup truck in the parking lot that made me slam on my brakes. My hands trembled as I pulled into the gas station across the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through those same windows where Robert and I had celebrated our anniversary just 2 years ago, I could see them. All of them. Jake sat at the head of a large round table, gesturing animatedly with a wine glass in his hand. His wife Sarah laughed at something he said, her blonde hair catching the warm restaurant lighting. Their teenage daughter Emma was taking photos with her phone while their son Tyler scrolled through his tablet, completely absorbed. But it was seeing Linda that truly broke my heart. My daughter sat beside her husband Mark, bouncing her 8-year-old son Danny on her knee. The table was decorated with balloons and fresh flowers, exactly the way I had requested when I made this reservation 3 weeks ago. In the center sat a birthday cake with lit candles, waiting to be cut. They were celebrating Robert's 75th birthday memorial without me. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching through tears as they enjoyed appetizers, clinked glasses in toasts, and passed around what appeared to be wrapped gifts. The waiter brought plate after plate of food to their table. I recognized the expensive dishes because I had studied that menu for hours, planning the perfect memorial meal for my late husband. Sarah was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something elegant and clearly expensive. Linda had on jewelry that sparkled under the restaurant's chandelier. Even the children were dressed more formally than usual, as if this was a special occasion they had all planned carefully. The most painful part was watching them smile and laugh together. This was supposed to be a solemn remembrance of Robert, a chance for our family to share memories and honor the man who had loved us all so deeply. Instead, they seemed to be having a celebration, raising their glasses in cheerful toasts, while I sat alone in a dark parking lot. My phone was still in my hand from Jake's call. With shaking fingers, I dialed Marcello's restaurant directly. "Good evening, Marcello's. This is Jennifer speaking. How may I help you?" "Hello, this is Cathy Henderson. I had a reservation tonight for a party of 8 under my name. My son called earlier and said you had to cancel due to a double booking." There was a pause. "Mrs. Henderson? Oh no, there must be some confusion. Your party is dining with us right now. Everything is going beautifully. The birthday cake is ready, and your server mentioned that your son called ahead to make sure the meal went on your usual card. Is there something wrong?" The restaurant's answer hit me like a physical blow. I hung up without responding, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. Jake had deliberately lied to me. My own son had intentionally excluded me from my husband's memorial dinner, and they were all in on it. I watched for another 10 minutes as they continued their feast. The children were opening gifts now. Emma held up what looked like a brand new phone, while Tyler unwrapped some kind of gaming device. Even little Danny received a large wrapped box that made him jump up and down with excitement. This wasn't just dinner. This was a celebration, complete with expensive gifts and premium food, happening at the restaurant where Robert had proposed to me 43 years ago. And somehow, they were managing to pay for all of this elaborate meal while thinking I would never find out about their deception. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. These were the people I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for. The people who should have been holding my hand through the grief of missing Robert, not celebrating his memory while deliberately hurting me in the process. I knew I needed answers, but I also needed to be smart about this. Instead of storming into the restaurant and confronting them immediately, I decided to gather information first. I walked into Marcello's through the front entrance, my heart pounding so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. Mrs. Henderson. Sharon, the restaurant manager, greeted me with surprise. I thought you were already here with your family. They're having such a wonderful time in the main dining room. Actually, Sharon, I need to speak with you privately about the bill for tonight. There seems to be some confusion about the payment method. Sharon's expression shifted to concern as she led me to her office behind the host station. Of course, let me pull up your account. She turned her computer screen toward me, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The current bill showed $237 and climbing. Premium ribeye steaks, lobster tails, multiple bottles of wine, champagne, expensive appetizers, and desserts. But the payment method listed made my hands shake with rage. Your son called this morning to add 3 more people to the reservation and specifically requested that we make sure everything goes on Mom's card, as always. He provided your credit card information and said you wanted to treat everyone to the birthday package with all the upgrades. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Sharon, I never authorized Jake to use my credit card for anything. How did he get my information? Sharon looked uncomfortable. He seemed to know all the details, Mrs. Henderson. The card number, expiration date, even the security code. He said you had asked him to handle the arrangements because you were feeling overwhelmed with grief. We've processed several charges for your family over the past few months, using the same card, always with Jake calling ahead to authorize everything. Past few months. This wasn't the first time Jake had used my credit card without permission. I thought about recent statements I had received. Charges I assumed were my own spending during difficult grief periods when I wasn't paying close attention to details. Sharon, I need to see exactly what they've ordered tonight, and I need to watch them without being seen. Is that possible? She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Follow me. We have a private dining alcove behind the main restaurant with a view into the dining room. You can observe from there. From the hidden alcove, I had a perfect view of my family's table. What I saw made me sick to my stomach. Jake was presenting Sarah with a jewelry box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond necklace with matching earrings. Sarah gasped with delight, immediately putting on the necklace while Jake fastened the clasp. "Happy early anniversary, sweetheart," I could hear him say. "You deserve the very best." Linda received a designer handbag, something with a distinctive logo that I recognized from expensive department stores. She hugged it to her chest like a precious treasure. "Jake, this must have cost a fortune." "Don't worry about money tonight," Jake replied, his voice carrying clearly across the dining room. "We're celebrating new beginnings." The children continued opening gifts. Emma's new phone was the latest model, probably worth $800 or more. Tyler's gaming system was still in its box, with several expensive games stacked beside it. Even little Danny received a remote control helicopter that I knew cost well over $100. They raised their glasses again, this time with expensive champagne that definitely wasn't on the menu I had planned. Jake stood to make a toast. "To Dad," he said, raising his glass toward the empty chair that should have been mine. He would have wanted us to enjoy ourselves and look toward the future, and to new opportunities that are coming our way. The family clinked glasses and drank, completely oblivious to the fact that every dollar they were spending was being charged to my credit card without my knowledge or consent. I watched Jake's wife Sarah take photos of her new jewelry, probably planning to show it off to friends on social media. Linda was already transferring items from her old purse to the expensive new handbag. I pulled out my phone and called my credit card company's fraud reporting line. "This is Cathy Henderson, and I need to report unauthorized use of my card that's happening right now." I gave them the details of Marcello's restaurant and the charges being made. "My son has been using my card without permission, and I need this stopped immediately." The representative put a hold on my card and scheduled a fraud investigation. Every charge made at the restaurant would be reversed, and Jake would be responsible for paying the bill himself. But that was just the beginning of what I was going to discover about my son's deception. As I continued watching from the alcove, Jake pulled out his phone and showed the family something on the screen. They all leaned in to look, and I could see Linda's expression change from happiness to concern, then back to acceptance. Whatever Jake was showing them, it was something that required explanation and reassurance. Mark, Linda's husband, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He hadn't participated much in the gift-giving celebration, and now he looked downright nervous about whatever Jake was sharing on his phone. "Are you sure about this timing?" I heard Linda ask. "Trust me," Jake replied. "Everything is already in motion. By next month, all of our financial worries will be over." Financial worries? What was my son talking about? I had helped both Jake and Linda through difficult times over the years, and neither of them had mentioned any current money problems. In fact, just last week, Sarah had posted photos on social media of their vacation to Florida, showing expensive resort meals and beach activities. I realized there was much more to this deception than just stealing a family dinner. Jake was planning something bigger, something that involved my money and my family's future. And based on Linda's initial reluctance and Mark's nervous behavior, not everyone was entirely comfortable with whatever scheme my son had developed. The champagne kept flowing, the gifts kept being opened, and the bill kept growing larger. But I was beginning to understand that this elaborate dinner was actually a celebration of something else entirely. This wasn't about remembering Robert. This was about something Jake saw as a new beginning, a financial opportunity that apparently involved spending my money without my knowledge. I moved closer to their table, positioning myself behind a decorative partition where I could hear their conversation more clearly. What I discovered next shattered any remaining illusions I had about my son's character. Jake was speaking in low, conspiratorial tones, but his voice carried just enough for me to catch every devastating word. "I met with the real estate agent again yesterday," he told the family, glancing around to make sure other diners weren't listening. "Mom's house is worth $450,000, minimum. With the current market, we could probably get even more." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "And the nursing home? Sunset Manor has availability. I've already submitted the preliminary paperwork. With Mom's declining memory issues, it won't be difficult to convince the court that she needs full-time care." I nearly gasped aloud. Declining memory issues? I was 72 years old and sharp as ever. I balanced my own checkbook, drove myself everywhere, maintained my home, and had never shown any signs of cognitive decline. Jake was inventing a medical condition that didn't exist. Linda looked troubled. "Jake, are you sure Mom is really having memory problems? She seemed fine when I visited last week. You don't see her every day like I do." Jake lied smoothly. "She's been repeating stories, forgetting conversations we've had, leaving appliances on. Last month, she called me 3 times in one day, asking the same question about Dad's insurance policy." This was completely fabricated. I had called Jake once about Robert's life insurance, and only because the company had sent me confusing paperwork that required clarification. There had been no repeated calls, no forgotten conversations, and I had never left any appliances on. Mark finally spoke up, his discomfort obvious. "Shouldn't we discuss this with Cathy before making any major decisions about her living situation?" Jake's expression hardened. "Mark, you don't understand how difficult this has been. Mom is becoming a danger to herself. The responsible thing is to get her into professional care before something terrible happens." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, spreading several documents across the table between the dinner plates and gift wrappings. "I've been working with a lawyer to get power of attorney. Once that's established, we can sell the house and use the proceeds to secure her future care." Sarah picked up one of the documents, scanning it quickly. "How would the money be divided? The house sale would go into a trust for Mom's care, but there will be significant funds left over. Well, split those 3 ways between Linda, myself, and the grandchildren's college funds." I watched Linda's face change as the reality of Jake's plan became clear. Her initial concern was being replaced by something else. Interest. Greed. She was actually considering this scheme to steal my home and my independence. "What about the power of attorney?" Mark asked. "Doesn't Cathy have to agree to that?" Jake smiled, and the coldness in that expression made my blood freeze. "Not necessarily. With proper documentation of her mental decline, the court can grant guardianship even if she objects. I've been keeping detailed records of her episodes." "Episodes? What episodes? I lived alone, managed my own affairs, and had never had any kind of medical or mental health crisis since Robert's death. Jake was describing a completely fictional version of my life. I've also been documenting her financial confusion, Jake continued, pulling out his phone. She's been making irrational purchases, forgetting bills, and asking me to help with basic banking. I have emails and text messages showing her requests for assistance. This was the most shocking lie yet. I had never asked Jake for help with finances. I had handled all of Robert's and my own financial affairs for 40 years. My bills were paid automatically. My investments were managed through a financial advisor I had worked with for decades, and I certainly hadn't made any irrational purchases. Linda was studying the nursing home brochure now. Sunset Manor does look very nice, and if Mom is really struggling— She is, Jake insisted. Last week, she asked me who Robert was when I mentioned Dad's birthday dinner. She seemed genuinely confused about who we were talking about. I had to grip the partition to keep from standing up and screaming. This conversation had never happened. Not only did I remember Robert every single day with perfect clarity, but I had been the one to suggest having this memorial dinner in his honor. Jake was fabricating increasingly elaborate lies about my mental state to justify stealing my home. The best part is that her Social Security and pension will cover the nursing home costs completely, Jake continued. She'll be well cared for, and we'll have the resources to secure our own family's futures. Emma and Tyler will have their college educations paid for, and Linda, you and Mark can finally buy that house you've been wanting. Danny, Linda's 8-year-old son, looked up from his new toy. Is Grandma Cathy sick? Linda quickly shushed him. Grown-up conversation, sweetie. Keep playing with your helicopter. Jake reached across the table and patted Linda's hand reassuringly. I know this feels overwhelming, but it's the responsible choice. Mom won't have the stress of maintaining a house she can't handle anymore, and our families will be financially secure. It's what Dad would have wanted. The audacity of invoking Robert's memory to justify this theft made me dizzy with rage. Robert had spent his entire life working to provide for our family. He had saved every penny possible to ensure I would be comfortable in my later years. He would be horrified to know his son was planning to steal the security he had worked so hard to create. Sarah was calculating numbers on her phone. If the house sells for $450,000 and the nursing home costs are covered by Cathy's income, how much would each family receive? After lawyer fees and taxes, probably about $120,000 each, Jake replied. Plus, Wed split Mom's personal belongings and any other assets. I realized with growing horror that they had planned this entire scheme in detail. The nursing home, the power of attorney, the house sale, even the division of Robert's and my personal possessions. They were treating my life like a business transaction, calculating their profits while discussing my future imprisonment. Most devastating of all was seeing Linda's gradual acceptance of the plan. My daughter, who I had raised to be kind and honest, was being convinced that stealing my freedom was somehow an act of love. The expensive dinner, the lavish gifts, the celebration they were having tonight, all of this was being funded by money they planned to take from me through deception and legal manipulation. They were toasting their future wealth while lying about my mental health and plotting to control my life. As I listened to them discuss the timeline for implementing their plan, I realized that this dinner was never meant to honor Robert's memory. This was a planning meeting disguised as a family celebration, and I was supposed to be safely away from the restaurant, believing their lies, while they finalized the details of my financial ruin. Jake pulled out his phone with the satisfied expression of someone about to reveal a masterpiece. Let me show you the documentation I've been building, he said, swiping to what appeared to be a Facebook page. I created this page called Caring for Mom 6 months ago, he explained, turning the screen so the whole family could see. I've been documenting Mom's decline for the court case. From my hiding spot, I could see the phone screen as Jake scrolled through post after post. Each entry was time-stamped and detailed, describing supposed incidents that had never happened. March 15th. Mom left the stove on again today. Found the kitchen full of smoke when I stopped by to check on her. She didn't remember turning it on. I had never left my stove on. I had barely used it since Robert died, mostly eating simple meals that didn't require much cooking. April 2nd. Mom got lost driving to the grocery store she's been going to for 20 years. Police found her in the parking lot of a different supermarket, confused about where she was. Completely fabricated. I had never been lost. Never needed police assistance. And certainly never been confused about my regular shopping routine. April 23rd. Mom told me the same story about Dad's military service 3 times in one conversation. When I mentioned she had already shared it, she became agitated and accused me of not listening to her. This conversation had never occurred. Robert had served in the army, and I occasionally shared memories about his service, but Jake was describing behavior that existed only in his imagination. Sarah was reading over Jake's shoulder, nodding approvingly. These posts have dozens of comments from people expressing concern. It really builds a strong picture of someone who needs help. That's because I've been sharing the page with moms, neighbors, and church friends, Jake explained. Everyone who knows her has been commenting with their own observations. I felt sick, realizing that people I trusted had been reading these lies about me and believing them. Jake had manipulated my entire social network into thinking I was suffering from dementia. Linda looked troubled as she read through more posts. Jake, some of these incidents, I was with Mom on several of these dates, and she seemed perfectly normal to me. That's how dementia works, Jake replied with false authority. The decline is gradual, and people have good days and bad days. You might visit on a good day and not notice anything unusual. He scrolled to another post. May 10th. Mom asked me to help her balance her checkbook because the numbers don't make sense anymore. Found several bills paid twice and others not paid at all. Had to spend 3 hours sorting out her finances. This was perhaps the most infuriating lie yet. I had been balancing my own checkbook since I was 18 years old. My finances were organized and accurate to the penny. I had never asked Jake for help with banking, and I certainly had never paid bills incorrectly. The best part is the photos, Jake continued, swiping to a gallery of images. I've been taking pictures whenever Mom looks tired or confused. I recognized the photos immediately. They were taken at the hospital during Robert's final weeks, when I was exhausted from sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and emotionally drained from watching my husband die. Jake had photographed me during the most difficult period of my life and was using those images as evidence of cognitive decline. This one is perfect, he said, showing a picture of me looking dazed and exhausted. Mom at the doctor's office, completely disoriented after a simple appointment. That photo was taken the day after Robert's funeral. I had accompanied Jake to discuss funeral expenses with the mortuary director, and I was devastated with grief. Not confused or disoriented, Sarah had been taking notes on her own phone as Jake showed his documentation. How many people have seen this page? Over 200 friends and family members are following it now, Jake replied proudly. I've also been sending screenshots to the lawyer as evidence for the guardianship petition. Mark looked increasingly uncomfortable. Jake, don't you think Cathy deserves to know what people are saying about her? This seems like a violation of her privacy. Mark, we're trying to help her, Jake snapped. Would you rather wait until she burns the house down or gets into a car accident because we were too polite to intervene? Tyler, Jake's teenage son, looked up from his new gaming device. Dad, didn't Grandma Cathy help me with my algebra homework last month? She remembered formulas I forgot. Jake quickly dismissed his son's observation. That's different, Tyler. Math skills are stored in a different part of the brain than everyday memory. But Tyler's comment had planted a seed of doubt in Linda's mind. You know, Mom helped me reorganize my kitchen cabinets 2 weeks ago. She remembered where everything had been stored and suggested improvements that made perfect sense. Like I said, dementia is inconsistent, Jake replied, but his tone was becoming more defensive. She might seem normal for hours, then completely lose track of reality. I watched as Jake showed them video recordings he had made on his phone. I've been recording our conversations to document her confusion. He played a short clip where he appeared to be asking me questions, and my responses seemed erratic and nonsensical. But something about the video looked wrong. The audio quality was uneven, and my responses didn't match the natural rhythm of conversation. Emma, Jake's daughter, was studying the video more closely. Dad, why does Grandma's voice sound weird in this recording? The phone's microphone isn't very good, Jake explained quickly. But I could see he was nervous about the question. I realized with growing horror that Jake had edited these recordings. He had probably asked me multiple different questions, recorded my answers, then rearranged the audio to make me sound confused or incoherent. The important thing is that we have months of documentation showing a pattern of decline, Jake continued, putting his phone away. When we go to court, the judge will see that we've been responsible caregivers, trying to help a family member who can no longer care for herself. Linda was still looking through the nursing home brochure. The activities program at Sunset Manor does look comprehensive. Art therapy, music programs, garden walks. Mom will be much happier there, Jake assured her. No more worrying about house maintenance, bills, or safety issues. Professional staff available 24 hours a day. But even as Jake painted this picture of caregiving and concern, I could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about money, plain and simple. He had created an elaborate fiction about my mental health to justify stealing my home and controlling my life. The most painful part was watching Linda become convinced by Jake's lies. My daughter genuinely seemed to believe that forcing me into a nursing home was an act of love and responsibility. As Jake put his phone away and reached for the dessert menu, I realized the full scope of his deception. For months, he had been systematically building a false narrative about my life, involving my friends, neighbors, and family in his lies. He had created fake evidence, manipulated photos and recordings, and convinced people who cared about me that I was suffering from a disease I didn't have. This wasn't just theft. This was a complete destruction of my reputation, my relationships, and my independence. All so my son could get his hands on the house Robert and I had worked 40 years to pay for. The elaborate dinner, the expensive gifts, the champagne toasts. All of it was being funded by money they planned to steal from me through legal fraud. They were celebrating their future wealth while planning to imprison me based on lies. I thought the worst revelations were behind me, but I was wrong. Linda, who I had desperately hoped was an innocent victim of Jake's manipulation, was about to shatter my heart completely. Jake, I need to show you the photos I took yesterday, Linda said, pulling out her phone. I got everything cataloged like you asked. My daughter began swiping through images on her screen, and as she turned the phone toward the family, I could see exactly what she had been photographing. My belongings, items from my house. I got pictures of all the china in Mom's dining room cabinet, Linda explained. The complete spode set that Grandma Rose left her, plus the Waterford crystal glasses. I also documented the silver tea service and all the serving pieces. Jake leaned closer to examine the photos. What about Dad's coin collection? Already moved to my basement, Linda replied matter-of-factly. 3 complete sets, the silver dollars, the commemorative quarters, and those foreign coins he collected during his army service. Mark helped me carry the display cases last Tuesday. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Linda had been in my house 2 days ago under the pretense of helping me with spring cleaning. I had welcomed her warmly, grateful for her company and assistance. Instead, she had been stealing Robert's treasured coin collection, something he had spent 30 years building. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Linda, maybe we should discuss this privately. It's fine, Linda assured him. We're all family here. Jake, I also got Robert's workshop tools moved to the storage unit we rented. The vintage drill press, all his woodworking equipment, and those antique hand tools he inherited from his father. Jake nodded approvingly. Perfect. Those tools are probably worth $15,000 to the right collector. $15,000. They had researched the value of Robert's tools and were planning to sell them. These weren't just random possessions to them. They were inventory being prepared for liquidation. What about Mom's jewelry? Sarah asked eagerly. Linda's expression became slightly guilty. I've been taking pieces gradually, just a few items each visit so she wouldn't notice. The pearl earrings Grandma Henderson left her. The gold bracelet Dad gave her for their 25th anniversary. And that emerald ring from their trip to Ireland. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her neck, where she was wearing what I now realized must be my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in my family. The jewelry is already appraised, Linda continued. I took photographs to several dealers downtown. The emerald ring alone is worth $8,000. My emerald ring. Robert had saved for months to buy it during our trip to Dublin for our 30th anniversary. It was one of my most precious possessions, not because of its monetary value, but because of the memories attached to it. You've been busy, Jake said with obvious approval. What about the furniture? The antique armoire from Mom's bedroom is already in our garage, Mark admitted reluctantly. And that wooden rocking chair from the living room, the one that belonged to her great-grandmother. Linda was scrolling through more photos on her phone. I documented everything in the house that has significant value. The Persian rug in the hallway, the grandfather clock, all those first edition books in Dad's study. They had turned my home into a warehouse, systematically cataloging and removing everything Robert and I had accumulated over 43 years of marriage. Items that held priceless memories were being reduced to dollar amounts and profit margins. How much have you gotten for the items you've already sold? Jake asked. Linda and Mark exchanged glances before Linda answered. About $12,000 so far. We opened a joint savings account to keep track of everything. $12,000. They had already stolen and sold $12,000 worth of my possessions, and I hadn't even realized anything was missing. Linda's visits had been so frequent and helpful that I had trusted her completely when she offered to help me reorganize various rooms. The antique dealers said the grandfather clock could bring $18,000 at auction, Mark added quietly. It's a genuine 19th century piece. That clock had belonged to Robert's grandfather. It had stood in our hallway for 20 years, chiming every hour and marking the rhythm of our daily lives. Robert had wound it faithfully every Sunday morning, teaching our children about the importance of maintaining family traditions. Emma, Jake's 16-year-old daughter, looked troubled. Are you sure Grandma Cathy knows you're taking her stuff? Linda's response chilled me to the bone. Honey, Grandma's memory isn't very good anymore. She won't miss these things, and we're preserving them for the family instead of letting them sit unused in her house. Besides, Jake added, once Mom moves to Sunset Manor, she won't have room for any of this furniture anyway. We're actually doing her a favor by handling the disposal ourselves. Tyler, Jake's son, looked up from his gaming device again. But what if Grandma wants to keep some of her things at the nursing home? Nursing homes only allow residents to keep a few personal items, Sarah explained. They don't have space for furniture or valuable possessions. Everything has to be simplified. I realized they had researched nursing home policies thoroughly, not to ensure my comfort, but to justify their theft. They knew exactly what I would and wouldn't be allowed to keep, and they were using those restrictions as an excuse to take everything else. The hardest part was getting into Mom's safe deposit box, Linda said, lowering her voice. My blood turned to ice. You tried to access my safe deposit box. Jake and I went to the bank last week, Linda explained. We told them Mom had asked us to retrieve some important documents, but they wouldn't let us in without her signature and identification. The bank manager was very suspicious, Jake added with frustration. She insisted on calling Mom directly to verify the request. I remembered that phone call. The bank had contacted me about unusual activity on my account, and I had confirmed that I had not authorized anyone to access my safe deposit box. I had thought it was just a routine security check. Well, have to wait until after the guardianship is approved, Jake continued. Then we'll have legal access to everything. Linda nodded. I'm hoping there are more jewelry pieces in there, plus any cash or savings bonds Mom might have stored. They were discussing my private financial affairs like treasure hunters planning their next raid. The safe deposit box contained Robert's military medals, our marriage certificate, and a few pieces of jewelry that had been my mother's. These items weren't valuable to anyone except me, but Jake and Linda saw them only as potential profit. What about the house key situation? Sarah asked. Jake smiled. I had copies made months ago when Mom asked me to check on things while she was visiting Aunt Margaret in Phoenix. That had been last Christmas. I had given Jake my keys for 3 days to water my plants and collect mail while I spent the holiday with my sister. He had used that trust to create permanent access to my home, so we can continue moving things out gradually, Linda said. I usually go over twice a week anyway, so Mom won't think anything is unusual. Mark was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the conversation. Don't you think we should at least discuss this with Cathy before we take anything else? Mark, you don't understand how serious Mom's condition is becoming, Jake replied firmly. She's not capable of making rational decisions about her possessions anymore. We're protecting these family heirlooms by preserving them properly. Little Danny, who had been playing quietly with his new helicopter, suddenly looked up. Why isn't Grandma Cathy here for Grandpa Robert's birthday party? The question hung in the air for a moment before Linda answered. Grandma was Cathy couldn't remember about the dinner tonight, sweetheart. That's why Uncle Jake called to let her know it was canceled, but we're still having it, Danny observed with 8-year-old logic. It's complicated, Linda said quickly. Finish your dessert. Jake leaned back in his chair, surveying his family with satisfaction. By next month, all the paperwork will be finalized. Mom will be settled at Sunset Manor. The house will be on the market, and we'll all be in much better financial positions. To new beginnings, Sarah said, raising her champagne glass once more. To Dad's memory, Jake added, and to securing the family's future the way he would have wanted. As I watched my children and their spouses toast their plans to steal my home, my possessions, and my freedom, I realized that this dinner was never about honoring Robert. This was a business meeting where they finalized their strategy for financial exploitation disguised as family concern. The elaborate meal, the expensive gifts, the celebration, it was all being funded by money they had already stolen from me, and it was a preview of the wealthy lifestyle they planned to live after they had taken everything else I owned. Most devastating of all was the realization that both of my children were actively participating in this scheme. Jake was the mastermind, but Linda was an enthusiastic accomplice who had been systematically looting my home for months while pretending to care for me. They had turned my grief over Robert's death into an opportunity for their own enrichment, and they were using my trust and love against me to facilitate their theft. Instead of confronting them immediately, I knew I needed to be smarter than my children had been. While they continued their celebration, believing I was safely away from the restaurant, I began making phone calls that would change everything. My first call was to Patricia Walsh, my lawyer and longtime friend. Patricia had handled Robert's will and our family's legal affairs for over 15 years. I reached her emergency line, something she had given me after Robert's death in case I ever needed immediate legal assistance. Patricia, this is Cathy Henderson. I need your help urgently. Cathy, are you all right? It's quite late for a call. I'm at Marcello's restaurant, and I've discovered that my son Jake has been planning to steal my house and force me into a nursing home. I need to know what legal protections I have. There was a brief pause before Patricia's voice became very serious. Cathy, I'm glad you called. Jake visited my office 3 days ago with a very strange request. My heart sank. What did he want? He claimed you had asked him to help update your will because you were becoming confused about financial matters. He wanted to add himself as executor and beneficiary of your estate. He also inquired about power of attorney procedures. Did you prepare any documents for him? Absolutely not. His story didn't make sense, and he couldn't answer basic questions about your current mental state or financial situation. When I suggested we schedule a meeting with you present to discuss any changes, he became evasive and left my office quickly. Relief flooded through me. So he hasn't gained any legal control over my affairs, none whatsoever. In fact, his visit raised several red flags. I've received multiple phone calls over the past month from people claiming to be concerned about your mental health. Neighbors, church members, even some people who said they were friends of the family. They all described the same symptoms and expressed worry about your safety. I realized Jake's social media campaign had been even more extensive than I had overheard. He had actively contacted people in my life, feeding them false information about my mental state. Patricia, those reports are completely false. I've never shown any signs of dementia or confusion. Jake has been fabricating evidence to support a guardianship petition. I suspected as much. The callers all used very similar language, as if they were reading from a script. And Cathy, you sound perfectly clear and rational right now. My next call was to my bank's after-hours security line. As a customer for over 20 years, I had access to emergency services for suspicious account activity. This is Cathy Henderson, account number 7749. I need to report fraudulent use of my credit card and check on any attempts to access my accounts. The security representative pulled up my files immediately. Mrs. Henderson, I'm glad you called. We've had several unusual requests regarding your accounts in recent weeks. What kind of requests? A man claiming to be your son attempted to access your safe deposit box twice in the past month. He said you were ill and needed him to retrieve important documents. We denied access because our records show you've restricted the box to require your physical presence and a special verification code. I had implemented that security measure years ago when Robert became ill, wanting to ensure that only I could access our most important documents and valuables. We also received a request to change your mailing address so that your bank statements would be sent to a different location. The caller claimed you were moving in with family temporarily due to health issues. I never authorized any of those changes. We didn't process the request because it came by phone rather than in person with proper identification. However, Mrs. Henderson, I need to inform you that your credit card has been used tonight at Marcello's restaurant for a charge of over $300. I'm aware of that charge, and I did not authorize it. My son has been using my card without permission. Well, place an immediate hold on your credit card and reverse tonight's charges. The restaurant will need to collect payment directly from the person who ordered the meal. Perfect. Jake's expensive celebration dinner was about to become his personal financial responsibility. While still hidden in the restaurant's alcove, I sent a text message to Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor across the street. She was a retired teacher who often watched my house when I traveled, and I trusted her completely. Maria, this is Cathy. Can you check my house immediately? I think someone may have been inside today. She responded within minutes. Cathy, I saw your daughter Linda and her husband leaving through your back door about 2 hours ago. They were carrying boxes and loading them into their car. I assumed you had asked them to help with something. My suspicions were confirmed. While I was supposed to be safely away from the restaurant, Linda and Mark had used their stolen key to continue looting my house. Did you see what they took? Several boxes, and what looked like a large picture frame or mirror wrapped in blankets. Should I be concerned? Yes. Please call the police and report a burglary in progress. I'll be home within the hour to file a formal report. Cathy, are you safe? I'm safe, and I'm about to make sure this stops permanently. My final call was to Detective Morrison, a family friend who had worked with Robert on community safety programs before his retirement from the police force. Morrison was now working part-time consulting on elder abuse cases. Detective Morrison, this is Cathy Henderson. I need your advice about a family situation that I believe constitutes elder abuse and theft. Cathy, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you give me the basics? I explained Jake's scheme quickly. The false social media documentation, the plans to force me into a nursing home, the theft of my belongings, and the unauthorized use of my credit card. This is a textbook case of financial elder abuse, Morrison replied. The good news is that you've caught it early and you have your mental faculties intact. The bad news is that family members who commit this type of fraud are often very sophisticated in their planning. What should I do? Document everything you can right now. Take photos, record conversations if possible, and gather any evidence of the theft and deception. I can meet you at the restaurant in 30 minutes to witness their activities and take a formal statement. They're still here celebrating. They have no idea I know what they've been planning. Perfect. Don't confront them yet. Let me get there first so we can handle this properly. As I waited for Detective Morrison to arrive, I used my phone to photograph everything I could see from the alcove. Jake's expensive gifts to the family, the jewelry Sarah was wearing, the electronics the children had received, and the documents spread across their table. I also started recording audio of their conversation on my phone's voice recorder. Linda was showing Mark more photos on her phone, pointing to items in my house they hadn't moved yet. The dining room table and chairs are probably worth $5,000. We should get those next week. What about the piano? Sarah asked. Emma's been wanting to take lessons. Mom's baby grand is worth at least $20,000, Jake replied. But it's too big and conspicuous to move quietly. Well, have to wait until after she's in the nursing home to arrange professional movers. $20,000. Robert had bought that piano for my 50th birthday, knowing how much I had always wanted to learn to play. After his death, I had started taking lessons as a way to cope with grief and loneliness. Playing that piano was one of the few activities that brought me peace. They weren't just stealing my possessions. They were stealing the tools I used to rebuild my life after losing Robert. Detective Morrison arrived at the restaurant just as the family was finishing dessert. I met him in the parking lot and showed him everything I had documented on my phone. He listened to the audio recordings and examined the photos I had taken. Cathy, this is enough evidence to file charges for theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The false social media posts alone constitute defamation and could support a restraining order. What happens next? We're going to let them finish their dinner, then approach them when they try to leave. I want to see how they react when confronted with the evidence, and I want to make sure the restaurant gets properly paid for tonight's meal. As we waited in Detective Morrison's car, I felt a mixture of heartbreak and determination. In one evening, I had discovered that both of my children were planning to steal my home, my belongings, and my freedom, but I had also learned that I was stronger and smarter than they had anticipated. They thought they were dealing with a confused, grieving widow who could be easily manipulated. Instead, they were about to discover that 43 years of marriage to Robert had taught me how to be strategic, resourceful, and absolutely relentless when protecting what mattered most. The expensive celebration they were enjoying was about to become the most costly dinner of their lives. At 9:45, I watched through the restaurant windows as my family called for their check. It was time to end their deception permanently. I walked into Marcello's dining room with Detective Morrison by my side, moving directly to their table with calm determination. The conversation stopped instantly when they saw me. Jake's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Sarah gasped and instinctively tried to hide the jewelry box behind her purse. Linda jumped up so quickly she knocked over her chair, her face draining of all color. "Hello, everyone," I said, settling into the empty chair that should have been mine from the beginning. "Thank you for celebrating Robert's birthday without me. I trust you've all enjoyed your evening." The silence was deafening. Little Danny was the first to speak, his 8-year-old voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Grandma Cathy, I thought you couldn't come because you forgot about dinner." "I never forgot anything, sweetheart. Your Uncle Jake told me the dinner was canceled. But as you can see, that wasn't true." Jake was staring at me with the expression of someone watching their entire world collapse. "Mom, I can explain everything." "Please do," I replied, placing my phone on the table with the recording app still running. "I'd love to hear how you canceled a reservation that was never canceled. And Detective Morrison here would be very interested in your explanation as well." Detective Morrison stepped forward, showing his badge. "I'm investigating reports of elder abuse and theft. I understand there have been some concerns about Mrs. Henderson's mental capacity and some unauthorized financial transactions." Linda began crying immediately. "Mom, please, you have to understand. We were only trying to help you. Help me by stealing Robert's coin collection. Help me by taking my grandmother's pearls. Help me by creating false social media posts about my mental health." I reached into my purse and pulled out the legal documents Patricia had prepared months earlier as a precaution. "I have something for each of you." I handed Jake a restraining order and cease and desist letter for financial fraud. "This prohibits you from using my credit card, accessing my bank accounts, or making any false statements about my mental health. Violating this order is a felony." I gave Linda and Mark papers for theft charges and trespassing. "These document the items you've stolen from my house and the unauthorized entries you've made using copied keys." "Mom, we can return everything." Linda sobbed. "Please don't do this to our family." "Linda, I didn't do anything to our family. You and Jake chose to steal from me, lie about me, and plan to imprison me for your financial benefit. Sarah was frantically trying to remove the jewelry she was wearing, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't manage the clasps. Mrs. Henderson, I had no idea Jake was using your money for these gifts. Sarah, Jake used my stolen credit card to pay for this entire dinner, including the expensive gifts he gave everyone tonight. Did you really believe he could suddenly afford diamond necklaces and designer handbags on his salary? Emma, Jake's 16-year-old daughter, was crying as she gathered up the expensive electronics. Grandma Cathy, I'm so sorry. I didn't know Dad was stealing from you. Emma, I know you didn't. This isn't your fault. I turned back to Jake, my voice becoming firm. But your father knew exactly what he was doing when he planned to sell my house and force me into a nursing home based on fabricated medical evidence. Jake finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. The doctor said you might develop memory problems eventually. I was just trying to prepare for the future. Jake, I've never seen a doctor who suggested any cognitive decline. You invented that diagnosis to justify your theft. I pulled out my phone and showed Detective Morrison the audio recording I had made. I have evidence of you planning this entire scheme, including your fake social media documentation and your illegal access attempts to my bank accounts. Detective Morrison addressed the entire table. Ladies and gentlemen, financial elder abuse is a serious crime in this state. The evidence Mrs. Henderson has provided documents, theft, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges that could result in significant jail time and financial penalties. Mark spoke up for the first time all evening. Detective, Linda and I want to cooperate fully. We can return everything we took and testify about Jake's role in planning this. That's a good start, Detective Morrison replied. But returning stolen property doesn't erase the crime of taking it. Sharon, the restaurant manager, approached our table with the evening's bill and a very confused expression. Excuse me, but we're having trouble processing payment for your meal. The credit card on file has been declined, and the total is now $387. I smiled at Jake. Since you ordered this feast and gave out these expensive gifts with stolen money, you'll need to pay for tonight personally. My credit card company has reversed all unauthorized charges and canceled the card you were using. Jake's face turned ashen as he realized the financial implications. I don't have enough cash to cover this bill. Then I suggest you start returning those gifts you gave with my money, I replied. The jewelry Sarah is wearing, the electronics for the children, and Linda's designer handbag should cover your dinner expenses. Linda was sobbing openly now. Mom, please forgive me. Jake convinced me that you were getting sick and we needed to protect you. Linda, I watched you photograph my belongings for sale and heard you discuss profits from items you had already stolen. That wasn't protection. That was greed. I know I made terrible mistakes. I'll do anything to make this right. I studied my daughter's tear-stained face, remembering the little girl who used to help me bake cookies and the young mother who had brought Danny to me for babysitting every weekend. Somewhere inside this woman who had betrayed me was still the child I had raised to know right from wrong. Linda, you can start by returning every item you took from my house and providing a complete list of everything you sold. You can also write a detailed statement for Detective Morrison explaining how Jake manipulated you into participating in this scheme. I'll do all of that, Linda promised. Mom, I'm so ashamed of what I've become. Tyler, Jake's 14-year-old son, stood up and placed his new gaming system on the table. Grandma Cathy, I don't want anything Dad bought with your money. This is wrong, and I'm sorry we hurt you. His gesture broke my heart and gave me hope simultaneously. Tyler, you're a good young man. Your grandfather, Robert, would be proud of your character. Emma followed her brother's example, placing her new phone beside the gaming system. I'm sorry too, Grandma. I love you, and I never wanted you to be hurt. Jake watched his children reject the gifts he had bought with stolen money, and something in his expression finally began to change. The arrogant confidence he had displayed all evening was cracking, replaced by the dawning realization that he had destroyed his family's trust and respect. Mom, Jake said quietly, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far. Jake, You created false medical records about me, plotted to steal my home, and planned to force me into a nursing home against my will. How much further were you planning to go? I convinced myself that I was protecting the family's financial future. After Dad died, I was afraid you'd make poor decisions or get taken advantage of by strangers. So you decided to take advantage of me yourself. Jake had no answer for that question. The logic of his justification collapsed under the weight of his actual actions. Detective Morrison addressed the family as Sharon waited patiently for payment of the dinner bill. Mrs. Henderson, how would you like to proceed with the criminal charges? I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Linda, genuinely remorseful and committed to making restitution. Mark, uncomfortable from the beginning and ready to cooperate. Emma and Tyler, innocent children who had learned an important lesson about the consequences of dishonesty. Sarah, manipulated by her husband but not malicious in her own right. And Jake, the mastermind who had orchestrated this entire betrayal, sitting in stunned silence as his carefully planned scheme collapsed around him. Detective Morrison, I want full charges filed against Jake for elder abuse, theft, fraud, and identity theft. For Linda and Mark, I'm willing to accept restitution and community service in lieu of jail time, provided they cooperate fully with the investigation and return everything they took. Linda nodded eagerly. Mom, we'll return every single item, and I'll provide a complete accounting of everything we sold. Mark and I will also pay restitution for the monetary value of items we can't return. What about the social media defamation? Detective Morrison asked. I want Jake's fake Facebook page removed immediately, and I want him to contact every person he told lies to and admit that he fabricated the stories about my mental health. Jake looked broken as he realized the extent of accountability he was facing. I'll do whatever you ask, Mom. I know I've ruined everything. Jake, you made choices that prioritized money over family, greed over love, and lies over truth. Those choices have consequences. I stood to leave, but first I had one final message for my family. Robert and I raised you to be honest, caring people. We worked 2 jobs each for years, so you could have good educations and opportunities. We taught you that family means supporting each other through difficult times, not exploiting each other for financial gain. I looked directly at Linda. Linda, you still have a chance to choose the kind of person you want to be. Your children are watching, and they'll remember how you handle making amends for your mistakes. Then I addressed Jake. And Jake, your children will remember this evening for the rest of their lives. They'll remember that their father tried to steal from their grandmother, but they'll also remember whether their father took responsibility and worked to make things right. As I walked toward the restaurant exit, other diners who had witnessed the confrontation watched quietly. At the door, I turned back to address not just my family, but everyone in the restaurant. Family isn't about blood relations or shared genetics. Family is about love, respect, honesty, and protecting each other from harm. The people who truly love you will never try to control your life or steal your security. Choose your family wisely, because real love never comes with a price tag. Outside the restaurant, Patricia Walsh was waiting with legal documents that would protect me from any future attempts to access my finances or challenge my mental competency. Over the previous months, when Robert's illness had made me aware of my vulnerability as an aging widow, Patricia had helped me establish an irrevocable trust, secure my medical directives, and create legal barriers to prevent exactly the kind of exploitation Jake had attempted. Cathy, you handled that beautifully, Patricia said as we walked to our cars. Your house, your finances, and your legal independence are all protected. Jake's scheme would have failed even if you hadn't discovered it tonight. I'm grateful for your foresight in helping me prepare those protections. What's your plan for rebuilding relationships with Linda and the grandchildren? Slowly and carefully. Linda made terrible choices, but she's genuinely remorseful. The children are innocent, and they deserve to have their grandmother in their lives. Time will tell whether we can rebuild the trust that was broken. Over the following weeks, Linda and Mark returned every item they had stolen from my house. They also provided Detective Morrison with detailed testimony about Jake's role in planning the scheme, including evidence of his false social media posts and unauthorized attempts to access my financial accounts. Jake faced multiple felony charges and eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution for the financial damage he had caused. Sarah filed for divorce within a month, unable to reconcile her love for her husband with the reality of his willingness to abuse his own mother. Emma and Tyler chose to live with Linda and Mark while their father was incarcerated. Both teenagers had been traumatized by discovering their father's crimes, but they responded by strengthening their relationship with me and committing themselves to the values Robert and I had tried to teach their family. Linda entered therapy to understand how she had been manipulated into participating in Jake's scheme. Over time, she was able to see that her initial concerns about my well-being had been gradually replaced by greed and rationalization. The process of making amends became a journey of personal growth that ultimately strengthened our relationship. 6 months later, I hosted a real memorial dinner for Robert at Marcello's restaurant. This time, Linda, Mark, Danny, Emma, and Tyler joined me at a table where everyone paid their own way and shared genuine memories of the man who had loved us all so deeply. Patricia Walsh also joined us, having become not just my lawyer but a treasured friend who had protected me when my own family failed to do so. As we raised our glasses in a toast to Robert's memory, I reflected on the lessons this painful experience had taught me. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel or unloving, it's necessary for healthy relationships to flourish. I discovered that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse or exploitation, but rather holding each other accountable to be better people. Most importantly, I learned that love without respect is manipulation, and generosity without appreciation is enablement. Robert would have been proud of how I protected myself and guided our family back toward the values we had raised our children to embrace. The woman who sat at that memorial dinner 6 months later was stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who truly loved and respected her. I had survived betrayal by my own children and emerged with my dignity, independence, and financial security intact. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone we love is the refusal to enable their worst impulses. By holding Jake accountable for his actions and requiring Linda to face the consequences of her choices, I gave them the opportunity to become better people than they had been willing to be when money was more important than family. The story could have ended with bitterness and permanent estrangement. Instead, it became a testament to the possibility of redemption, the power of forgiveness paired with accountability, and the strength that comes from refusing to be a victim of other people's greed. Robert always said that the measure of a person's character isn't whether they make mistakes, but whether they learn from those mistakes and work to repair the damage they've caused. Linda proved that Robert was right. Jake chose a different path, but his children learned from watching both their father's failures and their grandmother's strength. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of your love and trust? How do you balance forgiveness with the need to protect yourself from people who prioritize their own interests over your well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help others who are facing similar challenges. If this story reminded you of the importance of protecting yourself and holding family accountable for their actions, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and rebuilding trust in relationships. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that true family love always includes respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. May you be surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not for what they can take from you.